Welcome, everybody, to the very first episode of the Momentous Sports podcast. I'm your host, Kyle Israel. So, those of you that don't know, I'm a former UCF quarterback, entrepreneur, and now managing partner here at Magnolia Hill Partners, where my core focus each and every day is on our sports and entertainment platform, Momentous Sports. Today is a special one. We're kicking things off not with a guest, but with really a co-creator, someone I've worked with side by side to bring Momentous Sports to life. My friend, our CEO, and a force behind the vision, Marley Hughes. Marley, welcome to the show today,
Uh,
which
let's go. Let's go.
there's an
Thanks, Kyle.
intro. It's great to have you, man. Seriously. None of this would be happening without you, your vision, your leadership. And so maybe I can take this moment to give the audience an idea of what we're looking to accomplish here. If you followed sports, business, or real estate, even loosely over the past few years, you've probably felt the shift. Sports aren't just entertainment anymore. They're an asset class, a growth engine, a vehicle for building cities, platforms, and culture. This podcast is really our chance to explore that. We're going to talk to the people driving that change, from Hall of Fame athletes to investors, developers, disruptors. And we're going to do it with an open, honest lens. We want this to be educational. We want this to be approachable. We want this to be entertaining. And we want to tell stories about all the incredible things that are happening within this space. So today in part one, Marley and I are going to talk to you about the beginning, who we are, how we met, and why we launched Momentous Sports in the first place. And then we'll kind of roll into more of a specific topic as it relates to sports as an asset class, how we're thinking about approaching the asset class. I should say how we are approaching the asset class, both today and where we're going in the future. Why don't you give a background on MHP, who we are, and how we ended up with Momentous Sports?
Absolutely. Well, thanks, Kyle. And like I said, I'm so excited about this. I'm usually behind the curtain. I hate hearing my voice. I definitely hate seeing myself right now. I need to lose some weight. But I'm excited to be with you. I'm excited to share what I've been working on for, I guess the last 12 months in kind of stealth mode, in a lot of ways. And just excited to share with the audience what we're doing. And really, I think what we're doing is really unique. But as you asked, I'll give you some background on MHP. We've got another podcast called Driving with Marley, where we've gone a little bit over MHP and what that is. But for the folks that are maybe joining us here for the first time, MHP, Magnolia Hill Partners, is really a vision that myself and John Shane, who's the patriarch of and the chairman of the board for our company, have had for quite some time. We can get into personal backgrounds and different things, but I was really
Sure.
fortunate to be at the right place at the right time when I graduated university, which was actually a tough time economically. It was during the great financial crisis. But I was fortunate and blessed to meet a gentleman, John Shane, who's been in my life for almost 20 years now. And John Shane was one of the founders at a company called Franklin Square Capital Partners. Eventually, we changed the name to FS Investments. And he offered me a job to come in early days and help them scale that company. And it was a very, very successful company, still in existence today. And we can get into more background of exactly what that
Yeah, we
was.
will.
Institutional finance and real estate and a whole class of investment grade products that I had no idea existed as a young man coming out of college. But long story short, I had the opportunity to exit that company at the same time that John Shane did. And John is fortunate and blessed to have been very successful in his life and wanted to deploy capital off of his balance sheet in a way that was meaningful, impactful, and fun. And so John and his family afforded me the opportunity to move back to Florida. I was living in Philadelphia with my wife at the time, and to stand up essentially MHP in our family office. And so MHP, for those of you, very concisely, is the top co, the holding co, and the family office company that essentially has our holdings of investments, one-off investments, as well as our sub platforms. And now Momentous is one of those sub platforms. We have three sub platforms within MHP. And we're really excited about all of them, but Momentous has a special place in my heart. And we're excited to share about what that is. But Magnolia Hill Partners is an entrepreneurial group where we are here to multiply, amplify the capital for John and then the two other families that we oversee. And to do that with scaling businesses and scaling investments that are fun, have a very healthy ROI and are with great partners and people. And that's at the core of our DNA, is doing life and business with people that we love and we trust.
I mean, that was certainly, thank you for that background. And there's a lot of nuance within that, that I think, yeah, so many incredible stories. And I want to get back here in a second to kind of your childhood, where you grew up, how you got to the point to get to UCF, to get the opportunity with FS. I think that's a really important kind of part of your story. And we've got some similarities there, just with how we were raised and the background that we came from. So that was a great framing of how you got from when you graduated all the way to MHP today, now Momentous. But let's go ahead and rewind prior to when that opportunity with FS Investments took place. As a child, I know you grew up in the state of Florida. Why don't you give our audience, the listeners, a little bit of background about how you got to that point? Because that's just as remarkable of a journey as anything that you just laid out right now.
Yeah, listen, I mean, each of us have our own stories, and hopefully we have, something that we can share with our families later in life, and great stories, good and bad. And it's interesting, as I've gotten older, I've heard some incredible perspectives about life and, the family that you grew up with and the things and the principles that you can learn. Listen, at the end of the day, like you said, I was born in Akron, Ohio, so Midwestern by where I was born, and moved down to
I
Florida.
already forgot that. I already
Yeah,
forgot that. So I'm glad you reminded me.
Akron, Ohio is close to my heart. Both of my grandfathers worked at Goodyear Tire and Rubber, back in the heyday of kind of American manufacturing. Worked there for 50 years each. But I was fortunate that my parents saw that that was, a part of the country that was struggling at that time in the 80s, and moved me down to Florida, right before kindergarten. So I grew up in a great place, Sarasota, Florida, on the beaches of the West Coast, down below Tampa. And, listen, at the end of the day, I love my family. My family is incredible, but I grew up, really, really kind of lower middle class in a very affluent market of Sarasota. And my mom was a school teacher assistant, and my dad was in middle management at kind of various businesses in my life. And so from a young age, I had a really great, incredible relationship with my grandparents, my grandfathers, and they were both hardworking guys that were fortunate that they were retired, so I could spend a lot of time with them. But really, from a young age, I was working. I was constantly out. I was the same thing a lot of us have done. Out mowing neighbors' yards to earn some extra cash because I, wasn't getting an allowance or something like that. I had to make my own money. Um, Fortunate to be, working at a young age at one of the best steakhouse restaurants in Sarasota when I was 15, with an incredible group of people. And I was always fortunate that I did really well in school. My mom was obviously at the school with me for a lot of that. And so I was afforded great teachers, but I always did really well, academically. But I always knew that I needed to work hard. And so from an early age, started working hard. And I knew that, seeing the dichotomy of where I lived in Sarasota, and where my friends lived in terms of lower middle class to very, very high class. I wasn't materialistic, but I knew that I didn't want to live paycheck to paycheck, obviously. And so from an early age, I knew I needed to work hard and be a little bit different. And so when I was accepted to UCF, I was accepted to all the Florida schools, but I really didn't have recognition of where I wanted to go or how to make a college decision. Both my parents went to Ohio State, but then when they were pregnant with me, they both exited Ohio State. So I was going to be a first generation grad in college. I just followed my best buddy. I had a great friend, and I had some great friends in high school that were also really academically driven. But I was a nerd in high school. I didn't play any sports, professionally on the teams. I played golf and things like that, but I was just a nerd in high school. I got good grades and worked, and that's all I did. But I followed my best buddy to UCF, Alex Durko, and as soon as I got there, I saw the opportunity. I don't know what clicked in my head, but when I got there, I got this big campus coming from Sarasota to Orlando. And I just said, I'm going to do things differently. I'm not going to be just kind of the guy behind the curtain that's the nerd that's just, doing good grades and having good grades, and that's it. I wanted to do things differently. I wanted to be out there. I wanted to connect with people. I wanted to put myself in uncomfortable positions. And so from the early days, literally the first week I lived in Lake Claire at UCF, and me and a buddy that I had just met said, let's put a group together and like do this, kind of finance thing for Lake Claire. So I was like the head of finance for Lake Claire, which is stupid. I don't even know what that means now. But then that went on to a bunch of
Mm.
other organizations and different things. And so I was really fortunate to put myself out there in college, internships, organizations, and different things. And I just wanted to be the best version of myself and put myself in uncomfortable positions. And ultimately, that blessed me in a lot of ways and allowed me to get to FS.
Yeah, I mean, we don't have to get into this story, but one would argue that without putting yourself out there like you did, and being really as involved as one could be, at least from what I understand, it was that extracurricular activity, relationships that came from that with professors and the like, that ultimately led up to the introduction to John Shane and FS, which I hear you say it to every one of the 15 or 20 interns that we've had. Like, listen, this is just putting myself out there, getting active, getting engaged is literally what led to that opportunity. And so I think, for anybody listening that's kind of in that position, and really I think that goes throughout life. It's a lot of how we wake up and see the world every day. The family office space, the private equity space, it's so relationship driven that, being out there building intentional, organic relationships is the name of the game. It is the core kind of thread within the business. And I've learned a lot from you along the way, in the last 3 years of the importance and value of that and the intentionality behind it. And so far, it's served us well.
Yeah, I would say for anyone
Um,
that's listening, listen, I did a lot. I've done most of my life wrong. But in reflection, if anyone's listening that's in college or has kids going into college, I get this question actually a lot from peers now that are sending their kids to college, like, hey, like I want them to go get a 4.0 and like they don't have time for an internship and they just have to excel really well academically. Everyone's entitled to their own opinion. For me, I wouldn't be where I am right now if I just studied, went to class, and got good grades. And so, a quick example is freshman year, we had phone books. Most people don't know what that is anymore. But I literally said, hey, I think I might want to be a financial advisor at the end of this college thing. I opened up the phone book and I literally went to the yellow pages. And as a freshman, an 18-year-old, just started calling financial advisors and said, hey, can I take you out to coffee? I think I want to be a financial advisor. I'm a college kid. I'd love to learn about your business. That's how I got my first couple internships. But the principle in that is if you're in college or have kids in college, put yourself out there. I think you can be really vulnerable as a college student and people will give you a lot of grace. And it's a unique position to be in. I think post college, people think you're just trying to get a job or something like that. And so really leverage the fact that you're a college student and that you want to learn. And I think that will open up a lot of doors for you because it did for me.
I think that message is I processed that through, kind of my own lived experience. We had a very different college experience, you and I. I'll give a little bit of background on myself right now while we have some time. I was born and raised in Orlando, Florida. My family moved to Central Florida, I think in like 1961, 1962, when my grandfather graduated from the University of Alabama, and moved to Central Florida to work for Lockheed Martin. My father is a minister, but also worked at Lockheed Martin. Interesting combination with those two roles. And our family started there. I'm the oldest of five, and I grew up 10 minutes away from UCF's campus. I was fortunate to have a family that loved sports. Sports was the focal point of really any conversation that I had with my dad, my uncles, my grandparents. Everything revolved around that. And I think looking back in a very healthy way. And I think through being in those rooms, it allowed me to gain a perspective and knowledge around sports in general, and then heavily into football. And so after graduation at University High School, I had the chance and the great fortune to earn a Division I scholarship. I always laugh when somebody puts Division I in front of what college they played at, but at UCF, I earned a scholarship and had the fortune of being the starting quarterback over a period of time there. We won a conference championship. We developed the on-campus stadium going into my senior year, which, based on the work we're doing today, is really cool that I kind of saw that coming up out of the ground back in 2007 every single day while we were running sprints and throwing up next to it. And
You guys weren't building it. You
it's
weren't throwing the
funny.
bricks around building it yourself.
I don't even think there's bricks. It's an aluminum
Oh, that's true.
stadium.
That is true. Yeah, no bricks.
They have some of that brick facade out there, but it was, looking back, you never know how life's going to pan out, and that was a unique experience. After I graduated, I went through the transition that often, athletes or anybody really transitioning to the next phase of life kind of may struggle with at times, which was like, what is my identity now? Like, how do I deal with the idea of losing all these teammates at one time? And I don't have, this rigor and structure to show up for practice and pursue a starting job. And then just everything that comes with, being a quarterback on a campus like that to that one day to the next is a challenge. And so I learned through that. I kind of went overseas, played football in Germany, Russia, and Poland, broke out of that kind of UCF Central Florida bubble, and came back with a very entrepreneurial mindset. Had the fortune and the opportunity to be a part of some emerging restaurant concepts early in my career, where I really kind of cut my teeth on the business side and matured that more into a master franchisee role with Little Greek Fresh Grill, where we took basically the Central Florida market from no locations to 15, and learned a lot about managing people and 16 to 22-year-olds in that period of time. And then one thing led to another. I never saw this coming. But as I was mentoring student athletes graduating from UCF, I really started to see a trend of what I would call depression, but something that I also struggle with, that transition to the next phase of life. And at that point, I said, there's got to be something done about this. And went down that rabbit hole. And where that led me was to a gentleman named Tommy Shavers, who ended up being my co-founder of a startup called Nestri, which is an acronym for neurostrength. And Nestri is doing incredible work in the neuroscience space and really at the intersection of sports and health. Or in the simplest way, you could think of fitness from the neck up. So really with intentionality, training the brain like a muscle, so that people can show up and perform at their best every day. And so that actually is where the genesis of our relationship started. At the same time that we were serving on the UCF alumni board together, I think you came up and introduced yourself. And somehow that conversation led to, hey, we've got this startup. Would you and Mr. Shane like to look at this as an investment opportunity? Which you did, and became our largest investor at Nestri. We'll save the personal side of my story and how I ended up here in Berlin, Germany for another episode. But ultimately, that relationship led to me joining you all at MHP, and then us building this strategy of sports and the intersection of sports and real estate, which is what we're building the platform of Momentous Sports off of. So UCF is very much a thread within our organization. Blair, our CFO and partner, is also a UCF alum. We have a ton of interns on our team right now that are UCF alum. We're fortunate to have an incredible partnership group and investors in Momentous Sports, the likes of John Elway, Tim Tebow, UCF alum and quarterback Blake Bortles, Andrew Cathy, the CEO of Chick-fil-A, to name a few. We don't take those investments, those relationships, that support lightly at all. But it has been fun, Marley, to have this kind of UCF centric, you know, base, and
Yeah.
to be building Momentous Sports in Central Florida.
Yeah.
Um,
I think if I
so
could pull the thread there, I think there's a lot of interesting dialogue around the status of higher education today. I owe UCF a lot. I think that whole business is evolving, not just UCF, but higher education. But I look back at my time there, I found it's an interesting paradox. I found my identity at college and at the end of college as I stepped into my career, and you were kind of searching for what your next identity was because you were an athlete, right? And then that was transitioning. But I would say that, in terms of looking back of where MHP is now, none of it would happen if it wasn't for the relationships and the connective tissue that I made at UCF and that we made at UCF. And so we were, you were somebody that I knew as a quarterback of the team. I never thought we'd be doing life and business and investing together. I saw you on the UCF alumni board. Reached out, just kind of let you know what I was doing. You let me know what you were doing, created an investment and then a friendship. And here we are. So I think, the world works in amazing ways. And I just feel like we're really blessed and fortunate to be doing something really different. I know we're going to talk a little bit more about what exactly Momentous is. You talked about the partners that
Yep.
we have. I mean,
Yep. Yeah. Give me your thoughts on the partners. I know that like anybody should, that is, you know, taken extremely seriously. It's not something we just throw out there, but give me a little thought or perspective of the partners here at Momentous.
and those aren't just names, right? So at the end of the day, when you talk about sports, I love sports. I love watching sports. I was never good at sports. I was nowhere near capable of even playing on, the JV freshman team, unlike you. But for me, sports was always a draw of the challenge of the personalities that were on the team. I grew up a Tampa Bay Bucks fan, Warren Sapp and Brad Johnson, who was the complete opposite of a Warren Sapp, and like different people, and John Gruden. Like, it was fascinating. It was entertaining. It was fun. You could tell it was obviously challenging. I mean, that defense back then was amazing. But sports has never been anything that I've been looking to and said, oh, like, oh, I want to hang out with that guy because he's XYZ, he's Kyle Israel. Because I was just never in that crowd. But as we started doing different investments here at MHP and then, the likes of Nestri and otherwise, I started to see how these people are really built, these athletes, people like John Elway, Tim Tebow, and others, and Blake. Blake Bortles is a legend at UCF, and I know we're talking a lot about UCF. Blake Bortles did amazing things at the Jacksonville Jaguars. He gets a lot of crap for what he did, but God bless him. He got them close to a Super Bowl and is a legend at UCF. And a lot of people, like, he did some really challenging things and overcame a lot of obstacles. I've gotten the good fortune to spend a lot of time personally with Tim Tebow. Obviously, he's known for his faith and different things, but he is probably the most competitive guy I've ever met, whether you're playing cards or dice or on the football field or in business. He is the most competitive guy out there. And so I started to see how these guys were built, their DNA, their their nuclear structure, back to Nestri.
Yeah.
And I want to do life and business with those guys because they're going to be winners. They want to win at whatever they do. And so as we started seeing opportunities to partner with them, it just proliferated. And so I can't say enough good things about John Elway, who's been a consummate professional, an amazing partner, Timmy Tebow, Blake, others. We've got a lot more that we're going to be coming out with. But the ability to align ourselves with people that are good people, focused on impact in the world and doing the right thing, and never want to lose, that's a good crew to be with. And so I'm
Yep.
just really excited that we can do that.
So am I. So am I. It's been incredible to see just the evolution, and let's take a step back real quick, of how we even got to Momentous Sports. And I'm happy to go back and forth with you on this because we've kind of explored this, not kind of, we've explored this entire space together, really over the last 24 to 30 months. But as a family office, I know a lot of the background was, with our team in the data center space, institutional commercial real estate space, investment management, at the core where the wealth was generated. How in the world did we end up, and why are we here pursuing sports as an asset class today? I know, obviously, the journey and how we got here, but to hear it from you, I think is really important.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it started with you, right? So again, we weren't looking at sports as an investment, because at the end of the day, John Shane is proud of his Nautica Polo and his normal cars, not his sports cars and his Gucci watch. And I say that, humbly and compassionately for people that do enjoy those material things. That's awesome. That's great.
Yeah.
John is not that guy. And so sports fits into that category. He wasn't saying, hey, I want to have my name up on that billboard or on that stadium. But, you being one of the first sports related investments that we made gave us the opportunity to see the impact that could make. You guys were obviously focused on sports and health tech, as you mentioned at Nestri. we started to be able to lean into that community more. And we started to see more deal flow that was, I would say less vanilla than your average opportunity to just invest in a team. And so we started seeing leagues and teams and personalities that were really interesting, and we leaned into that. And so one of the first things that we started to look at was professional soccer here in the US. And we had the good fortune of being involved in New Mexico, of all places, and owning a lot of land out there. And New Mexico is a relatively small state with a small population and a small business community, but some fantastic people. And as I was spending a lot of time out there on our commercial real estate, had the good fortune to be introduced to a gentleman named Peter Trevisani. Peter Trevisani was former Wall Street finance guy, ended up kind of semi-retiring with his wife out in New Mexico, which is a beautiful place to live. And he had a professional men's soccer team out there that was absolutely crushing him. I did not know anything about New Mexico United. I didn't really know all that much about American professional soccer, but I recognized that this team owns this community of Albuquerque and Santa Fe. Like these fans are fanatical, and this is really interesting. And so I got to know Peter, one of the best guys still. I mean, I say this to him all the time, one of the best guys. I know you've had the opportunity to really spend time with him too. An amazing professional, an amazing human, surrounded himself with an amazing organization and helped lift up an entire community through sport in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and Santa Fe, which is not too far down the road. And Peter asked if we would invest in his team. I didn't know a whole lot about the team or the economics or the P&L. He said what caught my interest though was initially that he wanted to build a stadium because they were playing in a third-party baseball stadium, which was fine, but it was really handicapping their ability to unlock revenue potentials through sponsorship, through concessions and food, through their own schedule. And he said, look, we are crushing it on the field in terms of our record. We are the number one in the league in terms of merchandise. Our internal operations team is absolutely amazing, but we're constrained by our real estate. And I thought that was really interesting, being a real estate guy and John and the rest of the team being kind of real estate professionals, that unlock of somebody saying, hey, we're doing really well, but we're handicapped with real estate. That opened up my eyes. And so that was the beginning, patient zero of saying, hey, sports and real estate is a really interesting angle. And it sounds like people out there might be handicapped or handcuffed in some way. Let's investigate that.
It was remarkably eye-opening to get into the economics and P&Ls and without, going into the details to understand, you know, how much enterprise value could be driven to an organization, to your point, when you unlock all those key revenue categories. And I really enjoyed going through the process with that team, with that opportunity. And it really was nothing, it was a snowball effect in a sense of about those 2 years ago, we started to really see a lot of deal flow within sports as an asset class. It was then like the extra layer of, okay, here's what this team can do with the stadium. And then there was another unlock. And I'll kind of use one of our portfolio companies today, an investment that we're incredibly excited about up in Jacksonville, Florida. I'll let you kind of give us some context on how that opportunity came to fruition. But it was at that kind of moment in time that we said, wow, when you add the mixed use real estate to the stadium, anchor that with the team, like this is incredible. And so, why don't you talk about a little bit more Sporting Jacks, how that came to the table, and the people that are involved, why we decided to make an investment there, and then ultimately how Sporting Jacks started to become not only an investment that we are extremely excited about and are, but a proxy for what we would want to do more thematically at Momentous.
Yeah. And if I could take, I mean, I know this podcast is about sports and business and investing, but I think at the end of the day, if I'm able to outline some of the principles that have helped shape my life and our lives and
Yeah.
reflection, and hopefully that's of value to the audience. So, here we are. I'm investigating New Mexico United, great team on the pitch, great team operationally in a place that I'm not all that familiar with and wouldn't put at the top of the board in terms of where I want to be investing, but, got my attention. And so I'm on a plane down to the Cayman Islands for a little conference event. And I'm sitting next to a gentleman that I was introduced to. And he starts telling me about a soccer team that he's investing in and expanding with Tim Tebow in Jacksonville. But more than that, he starts telling me about the vision that he has. And so, like I mentioned before, in New Mexico, I learned about the team and the operations and the P&L and then the real estate. Then you add a multiplier effect like a Tim Tebow and a Ricky Kaplan and some of the folks that are involved in Jacksonville with our investment up there. And you talk about impact. In New Mexico and Peter, we're doing amazing things in the community as well. But
Absolutely.
Ricky and Tim started to unveil their vision of, look, we're going to have a men's and women's professional team in one of the best areas of the country that is farming talent for the men's and women's national team all the time, and just a hotbed of talent in a place that has the Jaguars. But outside of that, on the NFL side, obviously, outside of that, doesn't have a whole lot of professional team affiliation, but has a great demographic. And so then you talk about the impact side. Timmy and Ricky start talking about the ability to intermingle Special Olympics Hall of Fame and thinking about making one of the first, if not the first, special handicap accessible stadiums for folks with special needs.
Yep.
And being incredibly thoughtful about, everything that the Tebow Foundation represents in terms of wanting to do good for humanity and for those that are disadvantaged in a variety of different ways. And I said, holy cow, like, looking back, I've got three little kids. Making money is fun. Doing sports investments is fun. But name another category of business that can have as much of a community impact as sports. I don't know if there is one. I'm sure there are some corollaries, but that vision really just exploded my brain. I'm having like a vision from Ratatouille. Again, I've got three little kids. Like when he tastes the strawberry and the cheese at the same time, like there's a great visual in that movie about how his brain just unlocks. And that's what happened to me with Jacksonville. And so we're super fortunate and humbled and blessed and excited to be in Jacksonville. There's some amazing news forthcoming. There's already been so much that they've done up there. But
Yeah.
that is the prototype. How do we go into communities in the US, Central America, Europe that have incredible demographics, incredible people, have an incredible yearning to have additional professional sports in their community, and don't yet have a place that they can go enjoy the game, have community involvement and engagement, and have that placemaking effort that really catalyzes an entire region. And there's so many opportunities that we found in the last 12 to 24 months, and that's what we're focused on.